Hey, welcome to Vinny Melkus Outdoors. I'm once again stuck in the house and I figured we'll go over a few things. I've done a series of videos in the past. If anybody cared to watch them, they're about grub fishing because I grew up grub fishing. Throwing mainly single-tail grubs and every once in a while a double-tail grub, but I grew up fishing Lake Powell and other lakes around the west and the Four Corners area in Arizona, and grubbing was a way of catching fish in tough times. And just if you had to pick one bait, you go and grab a 1/4 ounce jig head and a 3-inch grub and go to town. Now, in that series of videos, I kind of went over rigging and everything. We're going to go over that again because I kind of want to get a little more in depth real quick. I'm going to keep this short, but I want to keep it informative because when we get into winter, grubs can really shine. And when you get into where there's shad die-offs or the selective sizing of bait that the fish are really keen on in the late fall, or even when you get in crawdads before, certain species of crawdads actually, go into hibernation at a certain temperature, but we're starting getting into I think the second molting period. So a grub is a very effective technique regardless. And let's go over some of the manufacturers that you see out there commonly. It's kind of tough to find fishing tackle at the moment in a lot of places, but you can always find like Yamamoto grubs and Berkeley, Kalins, or there's a lot of places with Kalins, and then Chompers is another one, and I'll rate them. I think Chompers is probably the least. I mean, you might disagree with me. I don't like Chompers. Their plastic seems to be a little bit more. They smell like garlic. You can put them in your food or whatnot, but they kind of don't have the pliability that like a Kalins or especially a Yamamoto grub has. But anyway. So you have your single tail and double tail grub, and I want to show you, this is another manufacturer you need to look at, so you might have something here, is a Bass Pro. Whoever pours their grubs is awesome, good colors and whatnot. But you got your single tail grub here, bam. That one right there is a Bass Pro Shops one. This is sitting in the boat, so the color is a little, this is shad, natural shad color or something, but the color is a little off, but it was sitting in the boat, I was actually using it. I have that Mega Bass head on it. Not typically, I don't typically do that, but every once in a while, hey, what the heck, Because grubbing is one of those techniques that you lose a lot. If you're doing it right, typically, you're going to lose a lot of tackle. Well, in standard, of course, there's always the exceptions. We have a double tail grub. So you got your single tail, and here's your double tail grub. And in the West, we call these spider grubs. But you take that thing away, and you got a double tail. All you got is 2 tails on this bad dude. This one right here is a Yamamoto, which are excellent. My favorite by far. What do we rig these things on? Now you can rig these things various ways, but what do I do? What do I do, and what do I do 90% of the time is this guy. That's a ball head. It's super simple to find and relatively cheap. In a day and age when fishing tackle keeps going up, a grub and a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce or 1/2 ounce just lead jig head is super cheap. It's super easy to get by. But like if I'm fishing places where I'm not going to snag a lot, where I'm not afraid of losing high dollar stuff, yeah, I'll throw the Mega Bass. I mean it's super nice jig head, super realistic. But you can go get a handful of these, and I actually recommend, like if I'm fishing places like Lake Powell, a lot of the western lakes that have, or maybe even a table rock where there's a lot of rocks and snags and whatnot, and you're going to lose a lot of tackle. Expect to snap off if you're fishing these things correctly. So I always go with these. They're super cheap and very intuitive. So I was going to grab one of these grubs. There's a straight single tail. Now, if you go and you research a little bit about grubs, everybody or the majority of people are going to tell you how to rig it one way. And as with this tail down and your jig head inserted like so. It's not, hey, that's the right way, right? I do it the exact opposite. And that's how I was taught from my grandfather or whatever, and it seems to work out. So for the most part, what I do is I rig it upwards so that the jig head, I'm not going to insert the jig head on this, but for instructional purposes, so that the tail is like that. I come out, and how I know where this jig head is, I got the right one, is when that bend of the hook comes out of the smooth part once you get past the rib on a single tail grub. So I just literally pop that thing right through the dead center, run this all the way there, pull it out, run it over the jig head rib, and then make sure it's laying straight on the hook coming out of that smooth area there. That's when you know you rigged it right. And I don't know, it just gives a little different oscillation. It's really not that big a deal whether you rig it, you know, with the tail facing down or the tail facing up. I just feel more confident with the tail facing up. Little things. Now, colors. Now, it's just like anything else. You know, your typical shad patterns or like that translucent clear thing, that works a lot. Or the slight pink hue, like a shrimp color, that works really good. But if you had to go pick a couple colors out, there's some standards. So you only got a budget, you got a small budget, you got to go pick out some things for grubbing. You grab, you know, I would go, you can, the varying sizes on there, you know, like I said, I would have an 1/8 ounce, a 1/4 ounce, and 3/8 ounce if you had to start. If you had to pick 3, just get those jig heads, should be good to go. Standard colors, you got like a pumpkin color. Pumpkin's always good. It's like the standard on there, pumpkin and a watermelon. Your shad looking colors, which is the one I showed you out there. A shad color, clear, translucent with a little bit of coloring on there. And then you got your smokes. So if you had to pick, you know, get a pumpkin, which is like a crawdad looking one, a shad one, and then, you know, your smoke looking deals. And then also, can't go wrong with, yeah, your standard watermelon, red flake, and then maybe a lighter, more of a green pumpkin. But if you stick within those parameters and a 3 to 4 inch single tail grub, you should be good to go. You will catch fish anywhere in the country. I mean, I've caught fish in anywhere, everywhere. Now, I call these grubs, and most people call them swim baits, but you have your little 3-inch swim baits. And to everybody that I'm used to fishing actual swim baits, larger, these are grubs to me too. So there's the paddle tail grub, which I obviously fish those as well, but I like my my twister tails. So let's go on to the next grub, which I already showed you, which is the spider grub or the double tail grub. What do I fish those on? Well, you can fish them on a ball head jig. You fish them on a football ball head jig if you can find those. A little harder to find in a tackle shop, but it can be done on a single, you know, ball head jig. I usually put on more of a 3/8 ounce one, and I throw it on casting gear a lot. But if you have the inclination to go to Tackle Warehouse and find yourself some grubs or some jig heads, I would recommend these little guys here. Now this one is one of those perfection lures, and you know the bad thing about these, I think I've done a review on this, is these things snap off. But any kind of shaky head, like a football head type deal, works. You run that baby just down like it looks. Well, I always set this up so it's going to come out of that smooth part just like the other grub. Run it through so that it sits like this. And what happens with a football head, even if you don't have these little stands here, with a football head, you should be dragging this on the rocks. It always pops up and it's like a crawdad. You know, when he puts his pinchers up, like, you know, he's going to get attacked. And this, it just always stands on until you break these off. But either way, if you're dragging it right, you're coming up over the rock and snap, it pops it up. And you get a lot of strikes like that because it's like a crawdad that's just become aware of the bass there and he's throwing his pinchers up. But these, if you can get the lead head versions, because you snag these. I mean, I do pretty good, just depending on what lake you are. Not snagging these, but you do snag them up and you lose them if you're fishing stuff right. Another way to do it too is if, like, let's say, because a lot of people are in the Ned fishing, you can fish on mushroom heads, these grubs. Like I have a tendency to do that so I can interchange baits. So, you know, you got your standard little Ned head, and I'll actually just throw grubs on that now. I mean, there's a myriad of ways to do it. You got to think outside the box. I'm just showing you some of the basics and some of the cheap ways to do so. Because this is probably the cheapest technique you can get into, and you can catch fish everywhere at any time of the year. It's excellent bait. I mean, excellent technique to grub fishing. Now, excuse me. So like I said, there's, you know, a number of brands and whatnot. Now, what do I fish this thing on? What do I fish these grubs on? Well, with my 1/4 ounce and below, or even a 3/4, my single tail grubs. Let's go with single tail grubs. Granted, don't mind this lure that's on here. This is actually, you know, I was throwing a wacky rig worm on this rod for some reason. Well, it's just a good all-around setup. So I got here, if you can see, this is, you know, start with the reel. This is a Shimano Stratic CI4 in a 2500 series, and I got it spooled. And a lot of people don't do this, but they spool it with, you know, heavier braid. It's actually 6-pound suffix braid, and then a 6-pound fluorocarbon, and I have no issues with that. I actually prefer it real supple, and I can still see and feel bites. Knot strengths are awesome when you're putting the fluorocarbon in the braid. But anyway, that rod here is actually a 6/8 medium extra, or I think it's extra fast Loomis. I don't think they actually put it on here, but it's a fast action rod, and it's a G Loomis NRX 6/8 medium. Now, not to say, I mean, I just saying a budget, a budget technique. Well, you don't have to have an NRX to throw a grub. I just happened to get this a long time ago, and I want to personally fish with the best available equipment that I have. But you can get any kind of 6/8, 6/10 rod, medium, light, medium, with a fast action. And I know, like, for budgetary reasons, you can get like a Veritas or a Bass Pro Shops, like a Carbolite or something like that. It's like $100, and you can be all right. Now on the other side of things, okay, so throwing those kind of light football head jigs with these spider grubs. Now I don't have a reel on here, but I usually have like a 6/3 or a fast. You know, I prefer fast. I can always slow down as long as it has enough torque that you get a good fish that you can move them to like a 6/3 to even up to an 8/1 gear ratio. It doesn't really matter. Most of these reels are they're excellent. But on the rod side of things, you got it's a 6/8 medium extra fast action bait caster. I throw a lot of things on this, but I like to throw those light grubs with it, and this one happens to be a Legend Elite St. Croix. Like I said, budgetary. This is like a $270 rod. You don't need that. You can go to like the Carbolite or the Veritas series or something equivalent to that, and still get an excellent, a pretty decent rod for the price. Well, that's pretty much it, just to get you started off the grubbing. A lot of things, you can go into techniques. It's very simple to start off with. Well, I guess not it. Let's go into the technique a little bit. So when you first start off with grubbing, a lot of times when it's a bottom type bait, imitating crawfish, but you can, hang on, you can use it to trace or to throw like a small swim bait, and you do that when they're primarily on like a shad pattern thing. But if you're trying to throw it on the bottom, you're trying to imitate a crawdad, which you can do that, I'd say 75% of the time. That's kind of what you want to do. You literally cast out, you free spool that thing down, you let it hit the deck, and have an idea of how deep it is, because a lot of times they will get hit on the fall. You let it hit the deck, you pull it up, usually a pop and drop. You pop it up, it swims up, kind of does a little number, swims up a little bit, and then falls down. You just work your way back up, and that's how I always start. And that you can usually get bit doing that. You can drag it. The other thing is to drag it, which I cast out, let it free spool, put the rod tip slightly down at almost parallel to the deck, and just slowly drag it. And I could watch my rod tip just feel it as it's going over whatever gravel or whatnot. And when a fish will pick it, and it'll be or a whole, it'll just go like it's mush. And then, of course, like we just said, the tracing method, which is, you cast that thing out there, you can it down to a certain depth, and then you slowly grind that, reel it, at a certain pace, just getting that tail to oscillate, and that's more like your shad pattern stuff. But the pop and drops, what we call the P&D, that's primarily what I start off with, and it's let it hit the bottom, pop it up, like move it like 2-3 inches off the bottom, let it sink, pop it up. Sometimes I want to move faster, like you literally like pop that thing up, the grub goes up and then falls back down. And sometimes that's where you really find them out. I've done that, and sometimes you start getting that like almost reaction by you pop it up and they're on. They grab it as it like a fleeing crawdad. It just boom, like that thing just pops up off the bottom and smash. But anyway, I'll probably take this out on the water because it's starting to get cold, and it's usually a good time when you start having that first shad die off, and you have that last like crawfish molt. So I'll probably take that out and we'll get some footage of that, catching some fish. I think I did that last time and it was perfect. We're out of some treetops, caught some nice bass on it. Not necessarily that it was the best technique at the time, but it's a technique that you can employ and pick up, it can be the best technique, or it can get that one key fish, or just have a good time doing it relatively cheap. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.